Two selves exist within you, and the battle between them determines the entire course of your life. One self is weak, timid, filled with hesitation, fear, and excuses. It whispers to you that the risks are too high, that you should wait for tomorrow, that you should settle for less than what you truly desire. It craves comfort and avoids challenge. It would rather keep you safe in mediocrity than allow you to reach for greatness. The other self is strong, bold, decisive, and filled with courage. It urges you to rise, to act, to persist until victory is achieved. It sees beyond the obstacles, beyond the struggles, and it reminds you of the strength and power that already live within you. These two selves live side by side, but only one can rule, and the one you choose to feed, to nurture, and to obey will determine the destiny of your life. This inner conflict is not something rare or unusual. Every man and woman, regardless of background or circumstance, feels this tension between weakness and strength. The weak self always appears first because it is the voice of habit, the voice of fear inherited from the past, the voice of doubts gathered from childhood, from society, from failures remembered. It is comfortable, it is familiar, and it seeks to keep you exactly where you are. The strong self, however, is not content with comfort. It is the voice of growth, the voice of vision, the voice that urges you to step beyond what you have known and to claim what you are meant to be. The weak self tells you that you cannot, while the strong self insists that you must. The weak self always seeks to protect its own survival. It thrives when you hesitate, when you delay action, when you drown yourself in overthinking. It survives when you repeat the same excuses again and again. I am not ready. I do not have enough resources. What if I fail? These thoughts give life to the weak self and allow it to remain in control. It wants you to shrink back from opportunity, to avoid the risk of embarrassment, to live smaller than your true capacity. The weak self is not concerned with your happiness or your success. It is concerned only with its own survival, and it survives by convincing you to obey its voice of limitation. The strong self, on the other hand, grows every time you act in defiance of fear. When you take a step forward despite doubt, when you refuse to surrender despite setbacks, when you choose discipline instead of ease, the strong self awakens. It begins to stretch, to gather strength, to stand tall within you. Unlike the weak self, which thrives on hesitation, the strong self thrives on action. It is fed not by excuses, but by decisions. It grows stronger each time you choose courage, each time you stand firm in the face of uncertainty, each time you rise again after falling. The strong self does not demand perfection, it demands progress. It does not require that you never stumble, it requires only that you never quit. Within you, these two selves are always in dialogue. The weak self says you cannot, and the strong self answers, I will. The weak self says, wait until tomorrow, and the strong self replies, begin now. The weak self says, it is too hard, and the strong self insists, I will endure. This dialogue never ceases, but the outcome of the battle is decided by which self you choose to listen to, which voice you choose to believe, which side you choose to strengthen with your actions. Every day, every hour, every decision adds weight to one self or the other, until over time one becomes dominant and shapes the destiny. Greatness belongs to the man or woman who chooses to obey the strong self. It belongs to the one who silences excuses, who acts boldly in spite of fear, who refuses to allow weakness to come in. And the throne of the mind. The strong self is your true self, the self that was born for achievement, for expansion, for victory. The weak self is only a shadow, a construction of doubt and fear that the weak self thrives on fear, excuses, and indecision, and it must be starved and destroyed through conscious action. Fear is its food, and every time you allow fear to dictate your choices, the weak self grows stronger. It whispers to you in moments of opportunity, painting pictures of failure and embarrassment, convincing you that the price of risk is too great. It urges you to wait for a better time, to play safe, to remain within the boundaries of what is familiar. Excuses are its shield, and it has an endless supply of them. It tells you that you do not have enough resources, that you are not ready, that you were not born with the right gifts, that success belongs only to the lucky few. Indecision is its weapon, for by keeping you from choosing, it keeps you from acting, and in that hesitation it maintains control. The weak self is clever, subtle, and persistent, and if you allow it to rule, it will rob you of your highest potential. The only way to defeat the weak self is to starve it. You starve it by refusing to feed it with the energy of your attention. Every time you dwell on fear, you feed it. Every time you make an excuse, you feed it. Every time you hesitate and postpone, you feed it. To starve it, you must recognize its voice the moment it speaks and cut off its supply. When fear rises, you do not argue with it. You act in spite of it. When excuses appear, you refuse to repeat them. When indecision tempts you, you make a choice quickly and commit to it fully. The weak self cannot survive without your consent, and it loses its strength when you deny it the nourishment of your obedience. Destroying the weak self requires conscious action, not passive resistance. You cannot simply wish weakness away, because wishing is itself a trick of the weak self designed to keep you inactive. You must take deliberate steps that contradict its influence. If the weak self says you cannot speak in front of people, you rise and speak, even if your voice shakes. If it says you are not ready to begin, you begin anyway, even if your steps are uncertain. If it says you will fail, you reply with action, moving forward until results prove otherwise. Action is the weapon that pierces through fear, shatters excuses, and annihilates indecision. Each act of courage, however small, is a blow against the weak self. Each decision made firmly is another strike. Each time you choose to move forward instead of retreating, you weaken its hold until it withers away. The weak self hides behind comfort. It urges you to take the easy path, to rest when you should work, to accept little when you could achieve much. It lulls you with the promise of safety, but in truth it robs you of growth. The weak self never wants you to be challenged, because challenge awakens strength. It prefers that you remain where you are, for as long as you stay comfortable, it remains alive. To destroy it, you must deliberately step outside of comfort and embrace challenge. Growth does not come from ease. It comes from stretching beyond your limits, from facing the very things the weak self tells you to avoid. Each challenge faced is another nail in the coffin of the weak self. Excuses are the weak self's greatest allies, and it produces them in endless supply. It tells you that your background disqualifies you, that your present circumstances are too difficult, that other people are to blame for your lack of progress. These excuses sound convincing because they are based on fragments of truth, but their purpose is not to inform you. Their purpose is to keep you still. You destroy excuses by refusing to believe them, by proving them false through action. History is filled with men and women who succeeded despite every excuse the weak self could invent. They rose not because conditions were perfect, but because they refused to allow excuses to control their choices. By following the same path, you silence the weak self and awaken the strong. Indecision is perhaps discipline is the master key to unlocking the hidden strength within you, and without it, the weak self will always find a way to dominate your actions. Discipline is the force that allows you to direct your thoughts instead of being ruled by them, to command your emotions instead of being driven by them, to use your time with purpose instead of letting it slip away in waste. It is the bridge between what you desire and what you achieve, the difference between dreams that remain in the imagination and dreams that are brought into reality. Discipline is not something you inherit. It is something you cultivate. It is not a gift. It is a decision. When you decide to impose order on your own mind and body, when you decide to train yourself to act in alignment with your higher purpose instead of your fleeting impulses, you seize control from the weak self and place it firmly in the hands of the strong self. The weak self despises discipline because discipline exposes its illusions. The weak self thrives on the promise of later and someday, but discipline demands now. The weak self wants comfort, but discipline seeks growth. The weak self lives for indulgence, but discipline values restraint. Each time you practice discipline, you weaken the grip of the weak self. Rising early when your body begs for more sleep is not just a small act of routine. It is a declaration that you, not your weakness, are in command. Refusing to waste your time in meaningless distraction is not merely productivity. It is proof that your strong self is alive and awake. Discipline transforms small daily choices into weapons that cut down excuses and destroy hesitation. The greatest mistake people make is waiting to feel motivated before acting, but motivation is fleeting and unreliable, while discipline endures. Discipline requires no permission from your emotions, no agreement from your mood. D, no cooperation from your circumstances. It stands firm regardless of how you feel or what obstacles appear before you. The weak self waits for inspiration. The strong self acts through discipline. Discipline says do it anyway. Discipline says move forward despite how you feel. Discipline says fulfill your duty before you indulge your desire. In this way, discipline is not only the tool, but the shield, protecting you from the sabotage of the weak self. Discipline is built through repetition, through the consistent practice of doing what must be done day after day until it becomes second nature. Each time you act with discipline, you carve new patterns into your mind. You train yourself to obey the commands of your higher self instead of the demands of your weakness. Over time, discipline becomes a habit, and habits become destiny. Just as weakness grows stronger with neglect, discipline grows stronger with use. The man who practices discipline in small matters gains the strength to exercise it in great ones. The woman who governs herself in her daily choices gains the power to govern her destiny. Discipline begins with the small, but it leads to the great. Discipline also demands sacrifice because to gain one thing, you must often give up another. The weak self resists sacrifice, clinging to every pleasure, every distraction, every comfort. But the strong self understands that nothing worthwhile is free. To build strength, you must sacrifice ease. To gain wisdom, you must sacrifice ignorance. To achieve greatness, you must sacrifice mediocrity. Discipline teaches you to exchange what you want in the moment for what you want most in life. It is the power to choose long-term gain over short-term satisfaction, to trade comfort for growth, to deny the weakness in favor of strength. The power of discipline extends beyond personal control. It shapes how the world responds to you. A disciplined mind commands respect, while a scattered, uncontrolled mind invites defeat. Discipline allows you to finish what you start, to endure when others quit, to rise The battle within you is constant, a struggle between the part of you that seeks growth and the part that clings to weakness. The battlefield is your mind, and the outcome determines the course of your life. Every thought you allow, every decision you make, every action you take feeds either the strong self or the weak self. The strong self thrives on courage, persistence, and clarity of purpose, while the weak self survives on fear, laziness, and confusion. You cannot serve both at once. You must choose which one will rule. If you allow the weak self to dominate, your life will be filled with missed opportunities, regret, and a lingering sense that you could have been more. But if you deliberately strengthen the strong self, you unlock reserves of power that transform your reality. The battle is not fought once. It is fought daily, often in the smallest of choices. When you rise in the morning, the weak self tells you to stay in bed, while the strong self demands you begin the day with purpose. When opportunity appears, the weak self whispers of danger and risk, while the strong self pushes you toward action and growth. When obstacles appear, the weak self tempts you to quit, while the strong self urges you to persist. The struggle never ends, but each decision strengthens one side or the other. Over time, those repeated victories accumulate, shaping the person you become. The strong self can only be built by consistent triumph over the weak self, and every decision is an opportunity to shift the balance of power. The weak self is crafty. It hides behind comfort, telling you that rest is deserved, that distraction is harmless, that comfort is the reward of life. It tells you that greatness is not worth the sacrifice, that failure would be too painful, that staying safe is wiser. But this is a trap, because comfort is the breeding ground of weakness. The strong self, in contrast, knows that discomfort is the forge where strength is created. It welcomes struggle because struggle produces growth. It welcomes challenge because challenge builds resilience. The strong self thrives in difficulty while the weak self withers. To feed the strong self, you must consciously choose the path of resistance, the harder road, the uncomfortable step, because these are the moments where true power is born. The battle is also fought in your thoughts. The weak self fills the mind with doubt, worry, and fear, repeating the same poisonous ideas until they become beliefs. It tells you that you are not capable, that others are more gifted, that circumstances are against you. Left unchecked, these thoughts grow roots and entangle your spirit. The strong self, however, fills the mind with faith, confidence and vision. It says you are capable, that every obstacle can be overcome, that destiny favors the bold. To win the battle, you must become the master of your thoughts, deliberately rejecting weakness and embracing strength. This requires vigilance because the weak self never stops whispering. But through repeated practice, you can train your mind to obey the strong self until courage and confidence become your natural state. Action is the weapon that decides the battle. Thoughts alone will not win it. The weak self can be silenced only by movement, by doing the very thing it resists. If it tells you to wait, act now. If it tells you to retreat, move forward. If it tells you to quit, persist with greater intensity. Each act of defiance against weakness is a victory for the strong self. These victories accumulate into habits, and habits create character. Over time, the strong self becomes your identity, and weakness loses its grip on your life. But you cannot win once and assume the war is over. You must fight again tomorrow and the next day and day after that. The battle is lifelong, and the moment you stop fighting, weakness begins to creep back in. The greatest victories are won in the invisible arena, in the private choices no one sees. Self-mastery is the highest form of power, for it places you in command of the only thing you can ever truly control, yourself. Without self-mastery, you are at the mercy of every impulse, every distraction, every fleeting emotion that crosses your mind. The weak self thrives in this chaos, pulling you in one direction today and another tomorrow, leaving you restless and unfulfilled. But the strong self emerges when you learn to master your thoughts, your habits, and your desires. Self-mastery is not about suppression, it is about control. It is the art of directing your inner forces toward a definite purpose instead of allowing them to scatter and waste away. With self-mastery, you gain the ability to command your mind to think what you choose, to focus where you decide, and to act with intention instead of reaction. The weak self hates self-mastery because it means the end of its dominion. The weak self wants to indulge without question, to complain without restraint, to surrender without a fight. It thrives on laziness, excuses, and blame. It loves distraction because distraction keeps you from confronting its presence. But once you begin the work of mastering yourself, you shine a light on its illusions. You begin to see how often weakness has disguised itself as logic, how often excuses have been dressed up as reasons, how often procrastination has stolen your potential while pretending to be patience. Through self-mastery, you expose these lies and dismantle the weak self's control piece by piece. The foundation of self-mastery is control over thought. Every achievement, every failure, every success or defeat begins in the mind. The weak self allows thoughts of fear, doubt, and inferiority to dwell unchecked, and those thoughts slowly manifest into action. The strong self, however, guards the mind as a fortress, allowing only those ideas that lead to growth, strength, and achievement. This control does not come easily. It is the result of discipline and repetition. Just as a muscle is strengthened by exercise, the mind is strengthened by constant training. Each time you replace fear with courage, each time you substitute doubt with faith, each time you transform a negative thought into a positive command, you are building the muscles of self-mastery. The second pillar of self-mastery is control over desire. Desire is the engine of achievement, but without mastery, it can become the very force that destroys you. The weak self indulges in every desire without question, chasing pleasure at the expense of progress, wasting energy on pursuits that bring no lasting value. The strong self, by contrast, directs desire with purpose. It channels the burning energy of want into constructive effort, turning passion into productivity and ambition into results. Self-mastery does not kill desire, it refines it. It takes raw hunger and forges it into focused drive, ensuring that your energy is not wasted on trivial pursuits, but invested in meaningful goals that elevate your life. The third pillar of self-mastery is control over action. Thoughts and desires mean nothing if they are not translated into movement. The weak self postpones, hesitates, and quits. It convinces you that tomorrow is a better day, that conditions will improve, that waiting will make the journey easier. But tomorrow never comes, and waiting only strengthens weakness. The strong self acts now, moves forward, and persists. Self-mastery teaches you to command yourself into action regardless of fear, regardless of obstacles, regardless of circumstances. It builds the ability to act not because you feel like self-mastery is also the key to freedom. Most people live enslaved, not by chains, but by their own uncontrolled impulses. They are prisoners of habits they cannot break, emotions they cannot manage, and desires they cannot resist. True freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is being in full control of yourself so that you can choose your path without interfering. Self-mastery is the highest form of power, for it places you in command of the only thing you can ever truly control, yourself. Without self-mastery, you are at the mercy of every impulse, every distraction, every fleeting emotion that crosses your mind. The weak self thrives in this chaos, pulling you in one direction today and another tomorrow, leaving you restless and unfulfilled. But the strong self emerges when you learn to master your thoughts, your habits, and your desires. Self-mastery is not about suppression, it is about control. It is the art of directing your inner forces toward a definite purpose instead of allowing them to scatter and waste away. With self-mastery, you gain the ability to command your mind to think what you choose, to focus where you decide, and to act with intention instead of reaction. The weak self hates self-mastery because it means the end of its dominion. The weak self wants to indulge without question, to complain without restraint, to surrender without a fight. It thrives on laziness, excuses, and blame. It loves distraction because distraction keeps you from confronting its presence. But once you begin the work of mastering yourself, you shine a light on its illusions. You begin to see how often weakness has disguised itself as logic, how often excuses have been dressed up as reasons, how often procrastination has stolen your potential while pretending to be patience. Through self-mastery, you expose these lies and dismantle the weak self's control piece by piece. The foundation of self-mastery is control over thought. Every achievement, every failure, every success or defeat begins in the mind. The weak self allows thoughts of fear, doubt, and inferiority to dwell unchecked, and those thoughts slowly manifest into action. The strong self, however, guards the mind as a fortress, allowing only those ideas that lead to growth